Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. Today, I wanted to briefly come on and do like an introduction before the episode starts, because this episode, I interview Cintia Leone, my good friend and business owner. She has extensive training in emotional freedom technique, which is called tapping. And we also do some breath work in this episode. So I'm going to recommend, if you generally listen to our episodes audio only, you may want to revisit our YouTube link for this episode specifically to see the tapping points Cintia shows and demonstrates in the episode, so you can see where to tap on your body as you're going through practicing these exercises. I'm also going to link to her website in the show notes. So you should be able to, if you do happen to listen to the episode audio only and you want to follow up later on with learning more about the EFT tapping points, you can go to her website, and there should be diagrams and things on her website that talk about emotional freedom technique and how to utilize the tapping points to work through anxiety or whatever the goal is that you're working with the EFT for. So I'm just going to preface that quickly. Let's jump into the episode. I hope you all enjoy, and thanks so much for listening. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. Today, I have my good friend with me here, Cintia Leone. She is a business coach. She's an expert in starting and launching businesses and successfully, getting to the point where she can sell them for profit, which is amazing. She's also certified in a couple of different modalities that are really helpful, I feel like, in managing our emotions and working on our mental health so that we can feel more stable and confident in our lives. So I wanted to have her on today to talk about how you can use these tools to overcome some obstacles you might be having, or utilize them in helping in your personal growth. So welcome, Cintia.
Hi, Candice. Thank you so much for having me. What a surprise to be here. Feels very aligned.
Good. I'm so excited. We've been talking a little bit, her and I, about some of the recent things she's been learning about and training on. And I was super curious because I've seen them used before. Two of them are emotional freedom technique, or some people call it tapping. Is that the exact same thing?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Same thing. Mm-hmm.
And also breath work, because I feel like you hear about it. Like, I remember when I first saw tapping, they were talking about using it with kids in schools, but they were just showing pictures of the kids like randomly tapping on their body parts. And I kind of didn't get what it is or why you would do that or how that would be helpful. So can you tell us what it is and what it's supposed to do? Like, basically, what's the point of it and what it's supposed to be working on for us?
Sure. So tapping, emotional freedom technique, was actually developed by a scientist, not a psychologist or anything like that. Gary Craig, and he is the founder of tapping. He noticed that when it takes from the Chinese acupuncture traditions, and he noticed that these vessels or meridian points that we have are interlaced through our body, and they have a connection to our brain. And instead of going through the needles of the Chinese culture or medicine acupuncture, he designed a method where you would use your fingers as needles, because you always have your fingers and you can always tap and move this energy, similar to how it's done in acupuncture. So the way, I'm sorry, can you repeat your follow-up question too?
So what is it supposed to do when we tap in like the different meridians, right? Because
Yes. So the meridian points are intersections of our vascular system, basically. If you want to get really woo-woo about it, you would say that that's also our chakra system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So while you are tapping on these areas, you're actually making, just imagine as if you have energy, and that energy is not really flowing through regularly as a pipe, with water would. It gets fuzzy and zzz. Imagine a TV that has all of the signals kind of
Scrambled, yeah.
messy. So that's where energy gets messy in ourselves, because we're going through stress, or we're hold on to negative emotions, unsolved traumas or emotions. So what tapping does, it keeps on softening those energy points. And obviously you need to do this conscious about what you're trying to solve. So you need to know what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and you repeat this recipe, which there a sequence to it, and we can expand more on that as well. But with this sequence, you are voicing things that you want to improve in your life, habits, or past traumas. Although I don't work with any trauma related issues, I work more on the development of a person, since I'm not a psychologist and I'm not licensed. So I don't go down that path. But there are some therapists who also incorporate EFT to their therapy treatment as part of it, their
Interesting.
protocol.
So if it's touching on meridians and energy points, can people use it for like physical ailments, or is it only for like emotional and mental stuff?
There are research done, and there's so much to study on EFT, but there's some research that actually say sees improvement in pain, and habits, or I would say also like smoking, or people who want to give up
Oh,
drinking, anything that they have, an addiction to it as well, that there are improvements. And this studies show a person's brain under a, remind me the name of the MRI.
oh, MRI scans. Yeah.
MRI. Yes. So it
Mhm.
shows brains MRI pictures of a person who has done tapping for, it's obviously a long period, something like 2 months to three
Okay.
months. It's shown improvement in their MRI.
That's interesting because I had always been introduced to it as like for emotional regulation or mental health or overcoming anxiety. I know there's a ton of different videos like on YouTube if you Google emotional freedom technique or tapping, and
Yes.
they'll show you different ways to do it. Um, but I liked when we were talking before about how you start out with whatever you're struggling with.
Yes.
So, so it sounds like you could do it on a lot of different things. If you were like, let's say you're having anxiety about a job interview or something, right? So you would start the first round kind of processing the negative emotions or feelings that you're like are coming up for you, and then you could move into like tapping again on another round to reinforce a new positive outlook. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. And
Yeah.
you do the reinforcement 3 times. So the first time that you begin tapping on the karate chop, or that fleshy area of your hand underneath your pinky finger. So right there, you are working on the negative feeling or anything that you want to release at that point. And then you start working from your eyebrow or the top of your head. I never touch the top of my head on any negative, speaking anything negative. I always start from my third eye, in between the eyebrows. And you do that whole sequence. So it's under, between your eyebrows, then under your, on the temple sides of your eyes, and then under your eyes, and under your nose, and then chin, collarbone, and underneath, right where your rib cage is, right where, if you're a woman wearing a bra, you would, that area right there. and then you go back to top of the head. So all of those are meridian points. They can also be identified in the chakra system.
That's cool. So I found when I've done it that, because that was the other thing, that I was seeing videos that were like 2 minutes long, 5 minutes long, and I would do those and I wouldn't really feel much happening from those short ones. But when I would do it for a longer period of time is when I would feel like, oh, kind of like a release, or I felt shift, or I might cry, or something might come up for me.
Yes.
So is there a reason why somebody might benefit from shorter versus longer? Like what's happening with that?
I think you really need to connect with, you need to have that connection, right, at that point, and be truthful to yourself and honest on what are you working. Like everything else, if you start tapping, but you are still kind of leaning into the moment, because, it takes time. It's a warm up process, especially if you're not used to doing all the time. Like everything else, if you sit to meditate, maybe the first few minutes, you're still kind of like moving your position, arranging your cushion, and you still think about what you did before or things that you have to do after. But once you really arrive in your body and you really are mindful of what you're working on, so it could be a combination of many things. Also could be a combination of, because when you begin tapping, you begin moving the energy. So it could be that it takes a little longer for you.
Mm.
So I believe that each person is different.
Yeah.
So as anything else, when we do things, you have to cater to yourself and not necessarily the rule of the technique,
Mm.
but it should be something that makes you feel good about doing, just like
Okay.
yoga or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is important to acknowledge, because sometimes it's like if we feel like we did it and it didn't work, so then we
Yeah.
give up and we throw it out, versus I went back and I tried it again and I did it
Mm-hmm.
longer
It
and
can
I
take
got
time.
familiar
Yeah.
with it, because I was like, "Oh, well, I hear other people saying great things about this. Let me give it a try." So sometimes, yeah, I think that's a good point. If you think, "Oh, I tried it, but you didn't give it your own way and try it in your
Right.
own method," right?
Or
Like
sometimes,
basically.
or maybe you went in with so much expectation, that this
Mhm.
is going to be amazing, as other people say. But because your expectation, or you're so hyped up about it, it actually takes away from the exercise itself, because your mind, it needs to really be grounded. And that's why I like to incorporate a little bit of breath work as well, especially
Yeah.
before we start, to just calm the mind down and make sure that you arrive in your body and there's nothing else, bugging you, or that you're sitting in a comfortable position. Everything needs to be feeling good for you to be able to really surrender to the experience, I believe.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if I am coming into trying to do it frazzled and my brain is scattered all over the
Yeah.
place and I'm kind of like not really settled or grounded, it's taking me the first few rounds to just get into the present moment. I also feel like you were saying, letting it just be in a process of like, okay, what am I actually here to do? As you were saying earlier, like if I'm just like, I'm just going to tap because I'm going to tap because somebody else tapped, and
Yeah.
I'm listening to what they're saying, and maybe it's not what I'm dealing with, it does take a minute to get like, oh, well, I actually want to tap about this and not what this person's saying. So I can see where it's like kind of making your own might take a little bit of time. But I did want to touch on the breath work thing, because you also know about breath work, and I've had great experiences with breath work. And there's a lot of different kinds. Like I've heard of people say, oh, I practice this type of breath work and that type of breath work. So can you explain to us like what's the type of breath work you're familiar with, and what's it called, and how do you use it?
Sure. I got certified very recently for breath work. It was actually December of 2024, so not too long ago. We're in January 2025,
Yeah.
and Didn't even mention Happy New Year in the beginning
Oh
of this.
yeah, Happy New Year.
Yeah. So breath work activates your parasympathetic system, nervous system, which calms you. And it can also energize you either way, depending on the kind of breath work that you're doing, depending on the technique. So definitely breath work also has to be intentional, like anything else. You need to be grounded, but it does help grounding you. For an example, when we did the EFT the other day that we had a call, and I did the box breath work, which is inhale for 4, and you hold the air for 4 seconds, and you exhale for 4 seconds, and you hold no air. So you hold empty for 4 seconds, which is, I think, one of the most difficult parts is to hold empty because we're so used to having air, right?
Yeah.
What that breath work does, it really calms your nervous system. So I like to incorporate that with EFT before to just give time to arrive and to be centered, and to really lean into the experience. There are breathwork techniques that will definitely make you energized. There's a technique where you start breathing very fast from the bottom of when you put your hand on below your, hang on, gotta remember this.
Okay.
I'm glad you can edit after.
No. I think it's
Belly button.
okay. Yes.
So putting a hand below the belly button. Some people don't even feel that they are breathing starting from down there because
because a lot of people
we're
breathe
all
up here.
breathing up here, right? And you should think about your lungs as like a pear shape, and where you fill up the most is from the bottom. But we've been taught through society, family, and everything, just suck in your stomach, open up your chest, and
Oh yeah, as a posture
it's
thing.
the so-called corsets of life, right?
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. How like, especially as women, you're not supposed to have a belly, you know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah.
people are constantly
Tuck
sucking
in
it
your
in,
stomach,
and that's
tuck in your
reducing
belly.
their capacity for their breath. That's a good point.
Or even sometimes when we're kids and we go to school with those heavy backpacks, that definitely takes away your ability to just fill up your lungs with air starting from the bottom.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
think that's a good point. Yeah, the breathing through your stomach. I didn't realize until the first time I did breath work that I was not breathing, like I wasn't fully expanding my lungs most of the time. I was breathing very shallow
Shallow.
from the chest. And then I also realized later on, like, that filling up that space down there, it was like kind of like, oh, I can hold so much more air. And I realized I was holding my breath all the time. Like, I think it's a part of like being the complex PTSD and being anxious. You're just kind of like on edge all the time. And you just walk around like this. So I
Yes.
was catching myself just holding my breath all the time, right? Which I know is not good for our brain and our circulation and all the other stuff our body's trying to do with air. So, yeah, I think just getting used to like completely fully breathing down into your stomach is probably unusual or new for a lot of people who haven't done breath work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially, well, I work majority of the time with women, but I hear that all the time that I wasn't even acknowledging that I was not breathing. And
Yeah.
I also seen this. I have seen this even with my daughter when we're exercising together, that she sometimes holds her breath, and I'm like, "Are you breathing? Are you breathing?
Yeah.
You need to breathe. You need to
Yeah.
send air to your muscles and actually breathe." Because I think that the first thing that we do is when we're going through resistance of some sort, we just hold our breath
Yeah.
as if we're going to jump into a pool or something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I think, I mean, doing Pilates and yoga has helped me, like, because they'll be like, breathe, breathe, and they cue you. But,
Mm-hmm.
back when you get into your car and you go to the grocery store, or you're dealing with things, you just go back, fall into that habit of like, I'm holding my breath again. So with the
Yeah.
breath work, you talked about the box breath, the breathing down into your stomach. Is that different than the box breath? Is that a different type of breath work?
For the energizing one, it is. It comes from the diaphragm, breath holding. No, it's not even this. We got like scripts for the breath work as well. Yeah, so the script it's really like the counts, like round 1, inhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have like the counts for each type of breath.
Mm-hmm.
So what my coach coined as manifestation breath is a breath where you open your arms as a W, so you're kind of like expanding your chest. And then we have just inhale for 6. This sometimes can be a little bit too much of inhale at once, but we can modify depending, especially if I'm working with a person one-on-one, it's possible to modify. So just do
Okay.
4 or 5, right? So you inhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You hold for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
longer
Or
exhale. You
exhale.
really emptied out your lungs. And there are actually 4 rounds of this very same sequence done in
Okay.
this exercise. And we have what's called the expansion breath, which is another technique where we press with your
Your thumbs.
thumbs. You press that area in your eyebrows, and you just hold your hand up that way.
Uh,
And with that, we do 3 rounds of inhale, hold, and then exhale.
oh, that's
Yes.
interesting.
So there are some longer ones. And then finally, the one that is really energizing, it's what my coach coined as amplification breath.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually don't think that she coined these names, but the person who she's certified under. And for this breath, we we're going to move our arm as we breathe.
Oh,
So
it
you
reminds me
fold
of
your
like
hand with a fist like that,
Kundalini.
and you're going to just punch. Some people prefer to punch up, and we can put more intention to this also and say, okay, I want to break that ceiling.
Oh, like if you're
And I believe this
processing
is something
something.
that Tony Robbins incorporates in his daily,
Oh,
like
okay.
his routine, his morning routine.
Yeah.
Or you can just
Punch
go
out.
this way. So this is really energizing because now you're adding movement with breath, and it just gets you really going.
That's interesting because I never really thought of like using it for different purposes. I always thought, oh, breath work's supposed to calm you or regulate you or get you stabilized. But I didn't realize, oh, you can use it to kind of like uplift you if you're
Uplift
feeling
you.
like
Yes.
depressed or you're feeling tired or you're feeling like blah. Um, but yeah, that kind of reminds me of Kundalini yoga.
Kundalini.
Yeah, the Kundalini
I was
breath work.
going to mention
They
that.
like
Yeah.
hold their arms out. I've watched it and I'm like, I don't know if I could do
And
that.
they also do this,
Yeah, it's
right? Arm
very
up and down, up and down,
physically,
up and down.
yeah, and they do it for a long time. The breath work sessions that I had done, we were laying on a yoga mat and there was like music playing and drums, and they would use like tuning forks, and you would just lay there and breathe in a rhythmic pattern following them for like an hour. So it seems like there's all different types of breath work and different ways to do it for your purposes and what you've been trained in. Like, how long does somebody need? A few minutes, or should they try to do it for longer? Like, what's the best thing, and what do you recommend on
We did it to add on to other modalities. So our training was use breath work as an add-on to other modalities. So I also studied hypnosis,
that?
although
Oh,
EFT was really one of my favorites. Hypnosis is my second favorite. you can use breath work as add-on. So if I was going to do, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? A breakthrough session. Yes.
Okay.
So if I have you for a breakthrough session, I will incorporate relaxation breath work in the beginning. Then we can do some journaling, or we can do journaling, then breath work, then EFT. Then we do another modality. And then obviously in the end, we're going to set some goals, and we want to finish the session with a feeling of energy. So definitely in the end, we do another round of breath work for more energy.
That's cool. I think that's really important because if you can realize, like, oh, I have this tool, but it can do more than one thing, right? A lot of people will be like, oh, I meditate so that I feel more grounded and more centered and I don't have racing thoughts. But if breath work and EFT are both really versatile tools because you can use them for
Complementary and versatile. Yeah.
really like a multitude of different things if you know which way you're doing it. And I know you had talked about you're going to have stuff linked on your website and on your Instagram link, and I'll put all this at the end in the show notes for people who are looking at the in your phone. Why am I blanking out today? Inside your phone, underneath the show, it'll have all the
Show
information to get
notes.
to Cynthia's stuff, where you can access her her EFT guide, and if you want to work with her and do breath work as well, and all her links, because she's got great stuff on her social medias. But that kind of brings me to, so you were talking about coaching. So now, like, I met you, and when I first met you, you were like, I own this business and I own this business, and I was really dazzled. I'm like, this woman is from Brazil. She came here not as a baby, so you didn't come to America when you were little. You came as you were an adult, right, when you came to
Yes, I was
America?
20 years old.
Yeah,
Young
20.
adult.
And you came here and started not one, but two successful businesses that were so well established that somebody was willing to buy them from you, which means they were doing really well. And I'm just like, this lady is so impressive, because I just think I put myself in that place of, like, if I were to be moved to another country where I don't know the language, I don't know the rules, I don't know, like, I didn't study the political structure and the government, and to start a business, and it feels like so out of the comfort zone. So I wanted you to kind of like share a little bit about like how you did that to inspire other people to kind of get over their own limiting beliefs about what's possible for them, you know?
Yeah. Well, when I started the business, basically I didn't have another option, because at that time my kids were toddlers, or my son was a baby actually, and my daughter was a toddler. So it wasn't really so well planned, but I say that divine intervention just kept happening. But I really started, it was the why, anytime I'm talking to someone who's thinking about starting a business, I always ask them, what's your why? In fact, there's a book written on this topic.
I think I've heard of that one before. I
I
can't
gotta
remember.
remember.
If
Should
I
know.
if I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes too,
Show
because I'm
notes,
pretty sure
yes.
I've read it before. Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek, exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. So that's very interesting way of you starting, and that's not just for business, but for everything in life. And now that I think back, I wasn't really thinking through these things as so well planned. But now that I look back, is yes, I was somehow planning as such. Even when I left from Brazil, my why was to get the hell out of my family, who were just crazy. I just wanted a distance boundary, and the geographical boundary was the best boundary that I could have put in between us, because that really, at that point, was really on my terms when I want to connect with someone. And luckily, also in the 90s, we didn't have cell phones and all of these apps that people are constantly in touch with you. So it was even better for me at that time. So I was really able to create some boundaries, geographic, and also even the amount of times that I would speak to someone was really up to me,
Yeah.
no longer because they are my family and I have to put up with their craziness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that was the big thing, was the why I left Brazil. It was for just to give myself that peace in that distance. And also in in seeking another, more opportunity, more a different life, just a fresh beginning, a fresh start.
Yeah.
That's why I came here. And for the business was really because I had the kids, and paying a daycare and working full time just did not make sense for
Yeah.
us at that time, because how many people work and they barely keep anything of their paycheck because daycare system is so expensive. Um, so starting a business was flexible. I was able to do my hours as my family needed. I was able to, I was very lucky, very fortunate that my mother-in-law lived right next to us. So I was able to get childcare from her when I went to work. But then I could work from home, even though work from home was not a thing back then. I did that a lot.
Yeah.
Or even bring my kids with me. There were times when I just brought them with me to my business. It was a language school. Um, it's kind of interesting how a foreigner is teaching English, but that's exactly how I started. And
Sometimes you guys know it better than we do, I feel like,
yeah,
because you had to learn, I don't, when
more
you're
like
like,
the grammar.
yeah,
Yes.
I think it's different when you just learn it because that's what you grew up in, but when you actually intentionally want to learn something and you have a curiosity about it and a passion about in taking the information, you're taking it on probably at a better level than most people who were
And that's
just
all I
raised.
did too when I first got here, was study English. I literally walked around with a dictionary with me and like any notebook. I had gazillions of notebooks that any sentence I would not understand, I would write it down. And I'm also ADHD, which I didn't find out until I was 40, but now it explains how I can get very hyper focused on something when I enjoy, and that does help as well. So ADHD it's kind of like a curse and
And a blessing at the
and a
same
blessing
time.
at the same
Yeah,
time,
yeah. If you can figure
Um,
out how to use it to your advantage.
yes.
Yeah.
So, and also I started messy. I didn't even have a business planning to my second year in business. I just started. It was something very small. I was like, okay, I'm going to teach. I had already a job teaching ESL. It was with the city, but they let me go after I had my second child. And I came back a few months later and the job was no longer there. So I just continued teaching to people who were coming to me, and it started very low key, meeting in a library. And then my husband found this little two small offices, very tiny office above a laundry room in Everett, where I lived at the time. And he said, well, maybe you can be more official if you start teaching English there, and you can actually have everything that you need, because it was kind of uncomfortable to be going to the library and not having, a whiteboard to write and things like that. So that's another thing. I was very, very fortunate to have a husband who's always supporting me through this process of entrepreneurship. So I just started with what I had, started small, and just learned to take action. This is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
We can be thinking about manifesting everything that we want, but if we don't take the align action, to make things happen, it's not going to happen. And it was challenging. I had to figure things out as I went, but like I say, I get very focused, and anytime I had a problem, I had a mindset of how am I going to solve this? Everything can be resolved, solved, and I just got to figure out how to.
That's a good attitude to, just to stop right there, because I think so many people will hit an obstacle and they're like, oh, this is the end for me. That's it.
Yes.
I give
No.
up. There's,
Yeah.
instead of saying, no, there has to be a solution for
There
this,
is a solution.
and just to keep working at it and going around and trying a different way and talking to people. I think it is really helpful if you can find somebody who's like 5 steps ahead of you. You know what I mean? Which yours as in a language school, I don't know. That's not something I hear commonly. Like there's not a ton of them around, but find maybe somebody who started a different school or started something
Yes, I got
similar.
involved. I got involved with sort of masterminds of that world, that industry, and learned from others. I also, I will never forget that I was also told to just quit. And this was actually at a phase that I was already in a larger space, and we had more students, but I was looking to pivot to international students.
Oh, wow.
And I was told by other owners of other schools that don't even try going to international students, and you're never going to be able to get it. It's really complicated, the process.
Mm,
But obviously some people just don't want to see other people excel, and it's more competition for them. Who knows? So I've also been told to no so many times,
mm.
but you have to be resilient. And if it's something that you truly believe, in your heart, that's something you want to do, you just keep pushing, keep plowing through, and try to get it done.
That's a really good point. Like the taking, because I think for me, and I'm sure other people will resonate with this, is that people take the no personally. Like, oh, I'm not good enough. I failed. I'm doing it wrong. That's why they said no to me.
Yeah.
If I would have done this better, I would have got a yes for them. Instead of saying, no, that's just your opinion. I can go over here and find a yes. And I can't remember, I was listening to a real estate podcast a while back. And the guy said, if you get a no, you're talking to the wrong person. Just
Yes.
go find somebody else. And I have latched onto that so strongly now, because I have run into obstacles in doing things and I'll be like, okay, I got to know from them, but that doesn't mean I can't still have this. I just need to find someone who will give me the yes, right? Or
Correct.
find a different way to get, like what I was talking to one of my friends about, is find a different way to get what I want. So maybe if it's like I need to get a building permit, I don't know, or whatever, right? And I'm going to the county, and so I'm getting nowhere. Well, I figured out if I just call my state representative or my legislature or somebody who's in office that wants to get reelected and complain to them, suddenly my permit gets approved. Like I'm not saying that would work, but I'm just saying that I've
It's
seen people
just the
figure
idea.
out, yeah,
Yes.
workarounds. Like you figure out a way and you don't give up. And so I think
Yeah,
that's so
connections
important.
connections do have a big role to play with that. It
Yeah.
did for me as well. In networking, I was constantly networking with people and telling them what I wanted and what are my plans, where was I at the process, and just nonstop, a lot of resilience. And no matter how many no's I got and people just not being supportive, I would just think to myself, okay, someone else will be supportive for.
That's such a good point too, because the other thing I heard was like the closed mouth doesn't get food. So you have
Mhm.
to tell people, and I get hung up on that a lot, of being like, oh, I want to do this and X, Y, and
But you keep
Z
it
in my
just to
business.
yourself.
But I keep it to myself and I'm like protecting it and I'm scared to say it and I'm afraid to share it with people. But to be like, no, I want to do this and I want to do that. There's like a stepping through a fear and a
Yes,
vulnerability of somebody being like, oh, you're crazy. You can't do that. That'll never work. And then you have to kind of like, okay, am I going to listen to this person or am I going to take that and just throw it out and keep going towards my goal? Because I think that's another thing that people get so hung up on, is like, well, this person told me that I should give up on my dreams and they know a lot about this industry, so I should listen to them, right? No matter what it is that you're doing. I think all of us can face that, where we get
Yeah.
told things we don't want to hear, and we can give up and
And
start
for full
doubting.
transparency, I was not always, feeling like, yes, I'm going to do this. I had so many moments also of self doubt.
Mm,
But the key is go through those moments. They're going to happen no matter what. You can't just feel something and not acknowledge what you're feeling. But then talk to someone else. And that moment of encouragement that you get from someone else just helps you bounce right back and back
yeah,
to where you were before somebody else came, and knocked you down, sort of saying.
yeah,
But it so much has to do with us, our interior emotion regulation.
mhm,
Also, it has to do with how we see ourselves in the world. If you really believe in yourself, that there is something better for you, therefore you're going to continue going. And I don't think I consciously thought about this way back then. And I was in my 30s, I was still kind of getting my more mature, if you will, emotionally.
mm,
But I was in therapy, so that also helped a lot, because being an entrepreneur is very lonely and it's hard to talk to everyone about your fears, and
yeah,
especially about your past and things like that. So everything gets kind of that's another thing when you see entrepreneurs and even people in general, they think that outside of the house, you are that one career or business person. And inside your house, you have your issues or, unsolved emotions and things like that. And people tend to think that these things don't blend in, but it
mm,
does
they
all
do.
the time. So there is no hiding. If you are trying to build a business, but you're insecure, you don't want to be seen, there's a reason for that to happen, right? And there's a root cause. And if you never get to that root cause through therapy or however, you're just, it's kind of a separation, but it's fake because there is
Mhm,
no separation. You are one integrated individual. So you need to
yeah,
make peace with those unsolved problems or emotions or traumas, so you can then really um, get a fruitful life and be able to achieve what you want to achieve in life. And I guess a lot of people don't go places because maybe they're just okay of being um and I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, being your 9 to 5, but sometimes in the job that you don't love
right.
because you just are afraid of speaking up. I dislike what I do. I hate this and I love doing XYZ. So people are just
Mm,
afraid of coming out and saying what they want to do, because it's the way we grow up and it's what, we're taught, parents and family and friends.
yeah,
And the
I
next thing you
wanted to.
see, your whole life is passed by and you're being miserable.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to bring that back to two different things you said. One was the one word of encouragement from somebody can keep you supported and bolstered. And
Hmm.
two was that you literally chose to put like a continent in between your family and you, right? So it's making me think about, like, first of all, we have to, if we don't actively choose who we're surrounding ourselves with, and the
100%.
environment that we're putting ourselves in every single day, and we're just going through life not thinking about it, the people around us have such a big impact on us that we don't even really perceive. Like, I remember, I feel like I've always kind of had like this entrepreneurial spirit since I was young, but my parents would just take a shit on it every time. They would be like, that's crazy. That's stupid. You just need to get a regular job. Why would you want
Hmm.
to risk that? And without risk, there is no reward, right? Like, yes, you can have a safe job, you can have a boss, and you can go clock in 9 to 5, and maybe you'll get a 401k, maybe you'll get medical insurance. But you're never going to make more than the owner of that company.
You're
Like
just exchanging
you're
time
just,
for.
yeah, you're changing your time for money, first of all. And the second thing is like, even if you were able to climb the ladder and become the CEO, there's still shareholders and stock, that's the people who own the stock of the company who you're beholden to. So they still set your pay, right? Versus if you start your own company, you get to set how much money you make and there's no real limit. And as long as you can keep generating whatever the product is that you're generating.
Yeah.
So, but the point of that being like, you chose to leave your family because you felt like the environment wasn't the best, most healthy, supportive for you. And I did the same thing. And I put like an ocean in between my parents and myself. And I think that's the other thing is, and now I was like, okay, well, I got rid of the people who were kind of bringing me down and poo-pooing on me. I didn't get rid of them. I still talk to them, but there's the boundaries,
Yes,
right?
it's not the same
Yeah.
as living in the same town, city, state as you. Yeah.
Exactly. But then there was like an emptiness and I needed to fill it. And it was really hard for me to not fall back into finding people who were unsupportive, who were negative, who were just like, don't rock the boat. And so it's been difficult for me until like in the last 2 or 3 years when I really set an intention of, I want to bring in a supportive community, friends who are on my side, who cheerlead me, who don't backstab me, and there's not like petty, weird undertones, things happening. And so working on that, and it's like somebody will come in to my sphere and I'll hang out with them a couple times and I'll be like,
You can
no.
just sense. Yes, you can
And
sense.
I'm getting better and better as I go at clearing
Mm-hmm.
these people and not having any guilt around being like, you know what? Sorry, I don't want to hang out with you. But the truth of the matter is you have to take those steps in order to create that incubator for yourself to be able to do this hard work of healing your mental health, of healing yourself. Because if you're going and doing a tapping session and doing some breath work and you feel really good, and then you walk out into the living room and your husband goes, why are you wearing that? You look like a fat cow. How good is that, right? How
100%.
how much
Yes.
are you going to be able to make progress? You're not, because the person just like bulldozed your tower that you worked on building, right?
Well, wasn't that Dr. Bruce Lee who figured out that sickness, diseases don't come from your DNA, but they are developed through the environment
Wow. I'll have
that
to
you
look
live
that up.
in?
I'm going to go deep dive on him now that you're saying that.
Yes, he's amazing. And that is exactly what it is for us as, just if you want to use the analogy of a fruit, if you put an rotten orange with apples
Mhm.
or other oranges, healthy oranges, they will rotten as well. So I guess it is very close to that.
Yeah. So you created an environment where you were finding people who were supporting you, who were, able to help you if you had questions, or like, even though you were getting no's, you didn't let that stop you. You kept going and you kept finding the right things you
That's
needed
right.
for yourself.
I at the time, full disclosure, I went to speak to SCORE, which is this nonprofit by the Small
Administration.
Business Association. I want to
Okay. We
say. I'm
have
not
one of
very
those
sure
here.
if
Small
that's
business. It's like the Kailua Kona Small Business Association. Like they usually have
yes.
them in most metropolitan areas.
So they had mentors there who were. It's a nonprofit, so it's a free service, and they were so helpful. These people are retired executives, so they come from big companies and big jobs, high up jobs, and so they definitely have the experience. So I learned a lot with them.
Mhm.
But I would say that the most impactful thing that I did along the way, and it was really, again, divine intervention because it just happened that I was going through therapy. So actually knowing myself, knowing what would trigger me, knowing what would put me down, and also knowing how to listen to my thoughts and speak to myself in certain way
Mhm.
really helped me to anytime, there was just like an obstacle, to not necessarily let it stop me and I would quit. I would just look for another alternative route and
Mhm.
continue going.
Yeah. So not only were you reinforcing it on the outside, your internal self talk, you were catching
Exactly.
yourself and
Yeah.
saying, I believe in myself, or whatever your mantra was to overcome
Yes.
the internal doubt and stuff. So you were reinforcing from both ends.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we don't necessarily pay so much attention when we are talking to ourselves is how much self negative self-talk we actually
Mhm.
have with ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And that comes from the world we live in, the world we grow up. So if you don't grow up with a family system that is supporting you, and it's not just family but also all the environments that you are part of, friendships and school systems and everything else,
Yeah.
it's only natural that your brain is going to believe in that bullshit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you start to acquire those words in your
Internalize them.
mind,
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
your day to day. So I actually was already around, I was in my 30s the first time that a therapist looked at me and she say, wow, you're being so hard on yourself. You should give yourself more grace, and it would be awesome for you to see the things that you have accomplished so far rather than all of the things that you're just knocking yourself down with. And to
Mm.
me, that was a big aha moment.
Yeah.
And it really started, and then I don't, just I went further down with books and reading and journaling and doing a lot of work, self improvement work, and just really thinking about the words that I was using to talk to myself.
Yeah.
It was a huge shift.
Yeah. So as a coach now, because you've sold your businesses and you're becoming a coach, which I love that you have hands-on lived experience for people who want to start a business or female entrepreneurs who maybe have a business and they're trying to get it off the ground because you literally have lived through starting two different businesses. So you have a lot of versatility. Um, and it's also a very holistic approach. You're not just like, here's, because I've talked to business coaches before, like people with MBAs, and they're like, here's your checklist. Get this done, this done, this done, this done, this done. And it's very practical and it's very helpful. But they're not also addressing like the reason why I'm procrastinating is because I'm doubting
Hmm.
myself, or the reason why I'm afraid to put my picture of myself on my website is because of my insecurities. Like, I feel like your approach is so holistic. Like you
Yes,
said, it's not just your inner world and what happens at home and your business. You really are, both sides are impacting each other all the time. And your company and your services that you provide is helping people integrate them so that they can function successfully on like both all areas, right?
that's right. So I do try to bring a holistic approach where, yes, I am talking about strategies and tactics, things that you can apply to your day to day in your business to grow your business and scale. But also, I am very sensitive to the person's body language, their tone of voice, and to get the cues that they're bringing into the conversation. And just, hey, is there something else you want to talk about? Is there something else bothering you other than you just not getting a client? Or it's another approach to getting them to see how much they are able to do what they want to do, grow their
Mm,
business or start a business. And it's really rewarding to help in that way. It's not just here is, let's do a smart goal setting and
mhm,
just move on, because it doesn't work that way. You come out of a workshop like that, if you participate in a workshop or a session with a coach, and all that we're doing is the greedy and grinding the business kind of things, but you walked out of there and you're still not feeling fulfilled
mm,
from the inside out. I don't. It's a temporary fix, most likely, and it could just, you take that paper, you put it in your drawer, and you never act on it
yeah,
because you didn't get to the root cause of
yeah.
things.
Yeah, and I think like going back to the EFT tapping and breath work, now that I'm thinking about this, just like for my own business, maybe it would help me to do like a box breathing and a little tapping session before I sit down to try to work
Mm-hmm.
on my website, because then I'm going to be
Yes.
regulated and I'm going to be clear and I'm not going to be like all messy and all over the place, and like really figuring out how to take this part of myself and this part of myself and bring them together so that I'm functioning at my best, my best level.
Yes.
And I know we're almost out of time. And I think we only had one question that we didn't get to, but I really just want to promote you as a business coach. I know you have a passion for Latino women, to help them, especially Brazilians who are maybe transplants or still in Brazil, trying to help them start businesses and become successful. So do you want to share about like how people can get in touch with you and work with you if they want to and learn more about your work?
Yeah, I'm very active on Instagram, and my handle will be in the show notes. It's Cynthia Success Coach. And I also have a lot of free resources in my website, just ideas. I am starting to blog more, so putting my ideas out there. Um, and yeah, anyone can reach out to me. There's also on my website, there's link for my calendar where someone can book a call, a 30-minute call, if they have questions on any of the offerings that we offer the services, or someone wants to just work with me more on a holistic aspect, with EFT, breath work. That's a possibility as well. Although that's not necessarily on my website because I haven't gotten to that point yet, but it's still in the development, still in my plan to add that as well.
That's good. And you can do coaching in Portuguese as well. Is that correct? If they
Yes,
want
and I
to.
speak Spanish also,
Cool.
but not so perfect, but that's why Latina women, but I can definitely make space for any person who is Brazilian or Latina, speaking Spanish or Portuguese.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cynthia. I know we talk all the time off of line,
Yes.
so I'll see you
Yeah.
soon. But thanks for being on the podcast, and I appreciate you sharing about EFT and breath work with everybody
It
so
was
that
an
they can
honor. It
use
was
it.
absolutely super,
Awesome.
super happy to be here and provide this.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening, and have a happy new year.